Yeah, I'm excited about this morning. I really have no idea. That's okay. We'll pick it up later. No idea what to expect, what we're going to hear. But what we're going to do is have David and Jonathan and Tristan share a little bit about their trip. The other thing I want to talk about before they start is come on up, have a seat, is our rocks that we've been putting up here. I've noticed there's 4, 8, 10, 11 up here now, and I thought when we started this we'd start hearing stories, but so far I'm realizing that most of them are pretty personal. So if you ever remember, that rock is to represent when God has moved in your life, where he's done something special that we need to commemorate. So if it's ever something that you want to share, please talk to me. We would love to hear different stories about it as well. So anyhow, I'm excited to turn it over to these three and see where it ends up here. And when they're done, if there's time, I'll share a little to my microphone. They went down to West Virginia, southern part over near Kentucky, like
it's like as far down
yeah.
West Virginia.
It reminded me of a few years ago. It's almost been 9 years now since we took our youth from here down by our cabin in West Virginia. I don't know if you remember that. We fixed a house, put a roof on a house for, I think the guy's name was Lee. And the place was just trashed when we got there. Like, this house was not inhabitable. I should have got pictures up. I wasn't really planning on sharing this story, but I thought it's fitting. Like this, Lee was probably in his mid-40s, maybe 50 at that time, just very unhealthy, did not, like, he didn't take care of himself, didn't take care of anything. It's like, and that was a hard part. Like, this guy could be capable of taking care of things and himself and all that, and he just was choosing not to do it. So it was a little tough when we were there working on this house for him, like this guy that should have been doing this, and we're there, but like, no, God had us there for a reason. And if you remember, I know I've shared this multiple times, I went back a year later for hunting season, and I stopped and talked to him, and the place was completely different. It was completely cleaned up, had all his firewood cut, stacked. He was clean. He was taking care of himself. He just needed a boost. He just needed to know somebody cared about him, and his life changed. And so that's what these trips are about. And I'm excited to hear.
All right, here we go, I guess.
We kind of did the pictures in order, so Dave's going to speak, and then Jonathan, and then I am, we can all chime in, because there might be something about these pictures. This is the group. I'll just say this is the group. There was 4 churches, actually, technically. Us, Valley View, Salt Church, and then Center Street Evangelical, which kind of Steve Evans that was here and preached, I don't know, a month or 2 ago. He is the new pastor there, so that's technically, I'll say 4 churches were represented.
Yeah, there was supposed to be another group, but like, wasn't there? Well, I mean, there's
No, you need to use the microphone. You need to use the microphone.
Yeah. All right, I'll try to use the mic. I don't even know how to turn it on.
It should be on.
It's on? All right, we'll try it. Yeah, I think everybody was upset there was supposed to be like another group there. I know the one guy's daughter was mad because there was literally no girls other than her. So, but it ended up just being us 4 churches, which is perfectly fine.
As you can see, I'm the old guy. I need notes. These guys got it all under control. No, I had to have something. You'll also find out I am not my wife, so I am not the public speaker she is, but she's laughing at me. Okay, something like that.
He was our resident trim expert for the whole trip.
Yeah, well, it got a little beyond that. First, I want to thank the church for the support, and also Tristan for organizing, and his wife for getting through without you for a week.
Yes. Yeah, definitely my wife for not calling me and saying you need to come home.
Tristan and I rode together, actually. We were in Kimball, West Virginia, which Randy said we were about as far south as you can get, actually just over the mountain from Virginia. It is one of the 5 poorest counties in the United States. Then also in 2001 and 2003, a flood came through and really nailed that town. They had water up to 7 feet high downtown. The county's primitive, no sewers, no town sewers, it all gets dumped in the creek and the river.
For
You
once, I was glad I didn't take any of my fishing.
Yeah, you did not go wading. It was not, the smaller streams actually stunk. The one behind our house, you could smell it. You couldn't see it, but you could smell it. No flat areas. It's all up or down, which kind of gets
He's
us.
not kidding. Like, if you literally just picture valleys, that was the entire view. All the houses were built in the bottom of the valley, and then it was just straight up on either side of it. It wasn't any kind of fields. They didn't have yards. Their yards were like 2 pews, and that was it. They were nothing.
Yeah, and then they were at like I mean, literally the one we were at was probably steeper than a 45-degree angle because they were built. In Kimball, they did have like houses on the flat, and then they built up the side of the hill a little ways, but I mean, you weren't gonna weed whack. I mean, you could weed whack it, but that was it. It was very steep.
And that was why when he talked about the flood, it was so important because all these people were right up against the river that flowed through there. So as soon as the river rose, they had nowhere to go. And it just crashed a bunch of houses. Pretty much every house through the valley. The one lady, what was her name?
Markella. Markella.
Yeah, she was showing us pictures of her restaurant on the riverfront, and it has like 8 feet of water.
Yeah, and we were so deep in the valley, you did not see the sunset because actually the house we were working on, we were so deep in the valley, you could only see a little bit of sky. I was in a very narrow valley. I think all 3 of us worked on different jobs.
Yeah.
So let's get on. And humid, oh my goodness. I don't know if that's normal for summer, but I haven't sweated like
It rained like the entire time we were down there. It made it tough working on the jobs because I was doing a roofing job, and you could literally only see like this portion of the sky, and so before you knew it, it was raining. And so you'd have to try to cover everything up as fast as you could.
let's see, our lodgings were nice. They're in the church up there. The church is a Methodist church, and while they have like 50-some members, I was told the Sunday before we got there, only 6 showed up for Sunday morning. But it really was nicely set up. Mennonite Central Community did a nice job giving us beds, bunks, food.
It was like
Tool.
summer camp. They had
Yeah.
bunk beds in every room, and we were all crashing together.
Swap had been in that town, I believe it was about Appalachian Build in that town. I think it was about 3 years.
Oh, really?
It was much longer. There's a picture, I think it might be the next one of the map. I know you really can't see, it's only a small part of the county, but there's like 30 red pins, if you really blow it up, that are projects that they have not been able to even begin to start yet. So there is loads of work. Unfortunately, the couple that was our leaders, Lee and Peg Martin, their term's ending into August, and right now MCC has nobody to put in that position. It's a salaried position if you're interested, with benefits and paid vacation. I think it'd be reminiscent if we didn't talk about their trip down.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about. I was going to ask if you were going to say something.
Somehow I got stuck being the leader on the trip down, which,
You were the fastest.
yeah, I guess I was the one leading it, which made it all the more fun.
Well, that part was okay. Dave and I were following the Evans
Yes.
and Father Skip, and all of a sudden, Dave has his GPS on anyway, and we're like, oh, we think we should have, the Evans go zooming past this road, and we're like, oh, Dave's like, that told me to go down there, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, we'll just follow them, it'll be fine, I'm sure they have their GPS on, which they did, but apparently they had it set for like
Shortest route, I
shortest
think.
route or avoiding
Big
major
mistake.
roads. We're not quite sure because they turned off and it was okay, and then they turned another, and then you're in like a mountain pass basically. I mean, it was paved most of the time, but if you think of like a forest road, it was like one lane. It was switchbacks every,
No shoulder.
no shoulder, right?
One
we did
side.
meet one other
One
car,
side
I
you'd
think.
hit the side of the mountain, the other side, if it didn't have a guardrail,
Yeah.
you took a long
There was
dive.
a lot of confusion as to where we were going. Lucas tried to give everybody where we were supposed to go, and then as we were meeting and getting ready to go, he was like, oh wait, I gave you all the wrong address. Let me rechange that. And so when he showed it to me, I was smart enough that I just looked at it on a map and then looked at it on my map and dropped a pin where it was. So I knew where we were going, but at one point, everybody else, when you guys went to that mountain pass, Lucas was following me, and I turned off, and I'm on this road, and I stopped, because all of a sudden the texts are blowing up on my phone, and I had 2 passengers with me that were kids that had never used a phone before, so I was like, I'm going to have to text and drive. I was like, I'll take one for the team. And I'm looking at all these texts, and I'm like, they're like, where are we going? I don't know where we're going. And they're talking to Lucas, and I look, and we are about to run out of service. So I pull over, and I get back, and I talk. He rolls his window down, and he's like, what? I was like, are you reading these text messages? He's like, oh, they'll figure it out.
Which we did. We just took, and actually we arrived before everybody else. Well, we would have if we didn't have the wrong address.
Yeah.
But so apparently we just went over the mountain, and everybody else went like around the mountain. But it was interesting.
Wow.
Diana, Steve's wife, was like, that was like worse than any roller coaster I've been on.
It was wild.
It's interesting.
Roads got narrower, became gravel. We came around one curve, and I saw what I thought was a big black branch in the road. Ended up being a big black snake covering most of our lane. I missed it, though.
We didn't hit it, no. And then eventually, Steve took this one, we were coming up to another fork, and there's like this bridge that didn't look like it could support a car, and then this like, really like trail that went the other way, and Steve goes up this trail, and Dave's like, I'm not following him up there. He's like, I'm sure we're supposed to go this way. So then he goes about 100 feet and starts backing up, because it was like an ATV trail. They have the Hatfield and McCoy trail system down there, and so it's legal to drive anything on a 2-lane road. You can drive an ATV or whatever you want on a 2-lane road. So these trails, I don't know how far they go, but that's what Steve was on, and we said, no, we're not following.
For those of you that don't know, Steve is a little bit of a crazy driver, because I don't know what him and Skip were talking about, but they were falling directly behind me most of the way, and he was the type of guy that if he's following you, he is following you, and he's not paying attention to anything else. And he was falling right behind me to the point where it was almost irritating, because I was like, if I hit my brakes, you're going to hit me. And every now and then he would forget where I was, and he would be in the other lane going past me. And I would look over, and him and his passengers would be like in these intricate conversations. And then he would look over and see me and instantly slam his brakes on to get back behind me. And so it kind of became a game halfway through the drive where we would just like, as soon as we knew he wasn't paying attention, I would just slowly ease on the brakes to start fading back. And then he would lock them up and try to cut back in. So it made it pretty interesting on the way down.
Let's try, okay, that's the group I was with minus one. We have Pastor Lucas from Valley View, his daughter Maddie, and then we have Pam and James Palmer. That was the couple we worked for. James is legally blind. He's had a triple bypass, and he's also diabetic, so he has not been able to work for years, which has allowed his house to get in very poor condition. Let's see the next picture. I think I know what that one is. Okay, that's it from the front. Doesn't look too bad unless you... Appalachian Build has painted and fixed the trim on the front, and over half the building's covered in tarps. Mennonite Disaster Service is supposed to come this next week and put the roof on this half. Go to the next picture. That's what their house looked like before Swap Appalachian Build got to it. Water had been pouring through that roof for 10 or 15 years. Interior was rotten. It was a mess.
Believe it or not, that's what most of the houses look like at the area we were at. They look like that and worse, almost in everywhere you drove. That was a decent looking house compared to what a lot of the people were living in.
It was. Okay, next picture. Another swap crew. Appalachian Build's been on this house, I think, almost a year. They tore off the dorm.
It said 2 years.
Was it 2 years?
I think it was 2 years.
They've been on it a long time because there's a huge amount of work done. They tore off the dormers, put on a new metal roof on the backside. The one corner of the house had sunk a couple inches. They jacked it up, put new floor joists in the back two-thirds of the house, and reframed a lot of the front of the house. I mean, they have done a huge amount of work. Okay, next picture. Oh, they're framing. I figured I had to show one of the worst ones they've done because we were on houses that were better or in better condition. Okay, next picture, please. That's them. Somebody had donated the vinyl siding, so the back of the house got vinyl sided.
This would have been the door facing you with the dormers above it.
Yeah.
So this is the after.
Okay, next picture. Okay, we were told our assignment was supposed to be do some trim, replace a door into a bedroom, and maybe paint. Well, that got thrown out halfway through the first day. This pair of French doors going into the rest of the house, well, the house had sagged. There was an 1.5 inch gap on one side of the door from the frame. The other didn't open. So it ended up, I tore out the doors, and that is Logan with me. He's from Corey here. Nice young man. We totally tore it out, tore off the paneling, reframed it, built a new jamb, cut down the doors. So our little trim job ended up being a day and a half just on that door. Next picture. Well, that's it, done. Now it opens. Okay, next picture, please. Okay, this was Lucas's job site, though. I ended up helping him. He was to replace the door and jamb going into the bedroom. He pulled back the carpet, and there essentially was no floor. The carpet is what you were walking on. So his door replacement came into replacing a 3-foot square of flooring, and then the wall to the right side of it, the bottom, the 2x4s, the bottom 2 feet of them were rotted off. So he ended up reframing that wall, fixing the floor, then building a jamb and hanging a door. It was his first door he had done from scratch, so he did a good job. This was part of my second nightmare. That's the steps going upstairs. The bottom 2 steps, after we pulled some material away, were essentially rotted out. So I repaired those, and then let's go to the next picture, which the beams holding up the second floor above the staircase were mostly rotted out, we discovered when we pulled off some trim. So we had to do some things you will not see on this old house or Norm or any of them guys doing. We supported it best we could, and then I put a column in that went through the handrail down to the floor. But first I had to support the steps, then I had to fix the old floor, and then we were still concerned. So I'll go to the next picture. I want to see what, I don't remember. Flip another one. We built the post right through the railing. Click another one, please. Oh, well, we jumped. Tristan's giving Cadard lessons to Samuel. That was one night when we had some music for our evening entertainment. Okay.
Steve's wife can rock a fiddle, let me tell you.
Yeah, Diane's wife had the fiddle, and we had, what, 3 or 4 guitars? Next picture, please. Okay, we
This is
jumped.
my job.
Well, one more before I get that one, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
We ended up, the column had nothing to sit on, so we even made a 2x12 as a piece of baseboard to help support the column. You won't find it in any engineering book, but it should hold. There is no building permits, there is no inspections, there is nothing. It's whatever you do is fine.
I think that's why they let us go down, because they're like, whatever you can do, it'll be all right. This was one of the first projects my team was on, and the entire chimney was kind of rotted away. We had to redo most of the chimney, and it was funny because we started pulling away the top bricks because they were literally, you could push them out, and it got to a point where Lee, the guy in charge, was like, stop pulling bricks and just start mortaring it. It's like, because you're going to take the whole chimney out. All the flashing around the bottom of it was rotted away, and the guy that had owned the place had just tarred most of it, which made it even more difficult because we had to rip out all the tar. But the entire roof below that, as you'll see in a couple of pictures, was rotten. And this was actually the scariest moment of my entire trip. Was the first time we got to this job site. I went in to use the restroom, and the guy's sister had Down syndrome and couldn't really talk. So I went in, used the restroom, and I came out, and there was a curtain to her door. And she pulls the curtain aside and just looks at me and goes, come here. And I am like, I was thinking what every one of you was thinking. I was like, I'm in trouble. And what she really wanted to show me was that her entire roof was caved in, and they had just put a tarp over it. They didn't even put it over it, they put it under it. So it was just catching water and then running into the floor, which will lead to more problems later on. So we had to redo the entire chimney, which took forever. If you guys want to go to the next slide.
Oh yeah, I just put this. This is Lee and Peg, who were the people, the coordinators down there. I think they'd been with, I thought they'd been there 7 years, but maybe they'd been at a different site.
They were in Harlan,
different site,
Kentucky
okay.
first.
So
they've
worked for them for 7 years. They're very gracious. Peg does most of like the paperwork and coordinates the kitchen and the meals for us. And Lee is mostly like going out and helping on the sites, making sure you have materials, giving you advice as to what to do. But they were both very excellent at what they did, and I'm sure they're going to be a big hole to fill there. So That was that slide.
Yeah, Lee was amazing. He was super helpful. They have amazing tools and whatnot, and he's actually going to be an assistant teacher, I believe is what he's
Like
going to
an
be.
assistant construction VOTech teacher.
Which he's going to be amazing for, because I don't know how he puts up with all of us trying to work on jobs that none of us have ever worked on before in our entire lives. So this is the front view of the house we were working on, and all of the houses down there are about that size. They're like what we would consider camps up here. You know, if you drive along French Creek, all those camps, that's about the sizes of all of the houses, which was pretty nuts. But so we ended up having to rip the entire roof off because the gentleman that had owned this house actually put the roof on that we replaced, but he put it on wrong. And so we had to go through and take everything off, and with the intermittent rain, it kind of made it difficult to go back through because we were constantly fighting storms and having to put a tarp over it. Yeah, that was the hole in his roof, and that was after we put new boards and beams in there. We were literally looking down into, like when we were working and you drop something, you'd have to get somebody to go down, climb into the house, go into the bedroom and pick it up and like bring it back out because it was falling right through. And Peg actually sent me some pictures because we went in and showed Lee the bedroom, and the entire floor below it was rotten too because it had been leaking for, I don't know how many years it would take to get that much water damage, but it was incredible to see. And so we ended up having to put new OSB on it, new boards in there, and then we just ended up putting new metal roofing on there to go through everything, and it was quite the job. It was not at all what I had expected when I agreed to go on a mission trip. I thought it was going to be a bunch of guys and girls just going to work on houses, and it was so much more than that because there's so much more interaction with the homeowners and with each other up on these roofs that I never would have thought would have come about it. It was more of a bonding process than I would have ever thought was, part of it. And then, so my team actually finished what we were supposed to work on early, and so we ended up putting these signs in, which were was it first black hospital ever? Or
well, I don't know if it's the first one, but
something.
There was a hospital here for the black mine workers, but they never actually had any people.
Well, only a year, hardly.
Yeah, so we ended up putting in a couple of signs. That was myself and Nick, or Kyle.
I think they got like a grant from the city to do this, 2 signs.
Well, MCC did a lot of the research to dig up the history, and I don't know if you saw the book, but they actually made a book showing the history of this. I had looked at it the one night.
I think that's me sleeping on the couch.
In the middle of the day.
Yeah. We got done early.
This is the kind of the upper road of where in Kimball. It's kind of hard to take a picture of like this so you can see how steep it is, but in the actual town, which is where I worked, I didn't go out like in the hollers, I guess. The houses were a little bit bigger. I would say half of them are unoccupied, and they're very cheap. You can buy a house for like $10,000 or less.
The average house was like 20 grand.
Yeah. I mean,
every one of the houses that you see in those pictures, I think the 2 nicest houses in the entire area we looked at were the ones Lee and Peg owned.
Yeah,
because they
there's a
actually
couple
kept up on
that
it.
were pretty nice next to it,
But other than that, every one of those houses had busted out windows, water damage everywhere, roofs were caving in. It was honestly walking through a town that nobody lived in.
Well, when we were on our way, we drove by an abandoned Walmart, if you can believe that. Windows broke out. You couldn't
I've
make
never
it.
seen a Walmart that's not there anymore.
Even Walmart gave up on it.
So this is the house that I worked on, not the one in the foreground, but the one over to your left. And I think actually the homeowner's waving on the porch there. They had to go up, I think, like 47 stairs to get up to that porch, which is where their main living area was. That's how tall it was. Or you could go up to the alley behind and go down like 23, which is where we usually worked. You can go to the next slide. MCCAppalachia Build had put on the back part of this house a roof because there was a lot of water damage, and literally the house was built into the side of the hill. So I don't know if there's a picture of it, but there's just really nowhere for water to go. Go back 1 slide, so I'll talk about those. So what we kind of did was actually almost finishing a job for them. This room on the left is Kyle Keeler. He and I worked together. We put in a vinyl plank floor in this room that they had rebuilt. It used to be the bathroom, I mean, the kitchen of this house, and it's tiny. I mean, it's like maybe 6 by 8 or something like that. So they moved the kitchen out into what used to be the dining room, made it much bigger. They get a whole bunch of cabinets donated from retirement community, Mennonite retirement communities. So if like somebody's there for 25 years, they'll come in, and if a new person comes in to live there, they'll come in and take, redo the cabinets for them, and then they send all the cabinets and cupboards up to Lee to use. So they have this whole warehouse. I mean, it's a building, it's a room this size, full of cabinets. So they built them a nice kitchen, put in a couple windows, had to reframe this room because the sink was like falling into the floor, basically. So they had already reframed it, put on drywall, put on some T111, or T11, whatever that is, siding. We painted a lot. There's Father Skip painting a door. We painted the kitchen, did all the trim in the kitchen. You can go to the next slide. Jarrett Ohl went. He's a professional painter, basically. Paints with his dad. So we did a lot. Skip and him painted the whole entire time, basically. And then our main job was to move. This was going to be the laundry room, so we wanted to move the wash and dryer up to that room, which we did, and that was good. That's Kyle rewiring the dryer, I think. You can go to the next slide. This is Norm Wittig. I don't know how many of you know Norm. He's 87, and his wife recently passed away in January. So this is the first trip that he'd gone on in quite a while because he had been taking care of her, and he was using it as like a warm-up, basically, to see how much his body could handle and what he could do still. And so his testimony was pretty good. He's like, after the first day, I was like, I don't know if I can do this, like going up all these stairs and all this stuff. And then he's like, but then the adrenaline kicked in, and I just, was able to do it. And he had to ask for some things. I was not supposed to let him on a ladder. That didn't happen, but
The first day I went into their job at the end of it when we got done early, and I walk in and he's up on a ladder, like looking into the ceiling.
He's like, that was Luke that told you that. So I'm like, okay. But he would give us some advice on what to do. Next slide. Oh, there he is sitting in the bathtub. So he had the time of his life, and really, it was an inspiration. This is the bathroom. I don't know if I put another picture up. This is the next job that they have to do in, I don't remember their name, in our family's house. It was very, you'd walk in there and be like, you use that's the bathroom you use? And there's a toilet, and there was a shower, the tub, which I don't actually know if they used the tub. I'm not sure, but water had leaked in, and it was all rotten out. There wasn't a sink. So hopefully this week they got to that bathroom.
I think I've seen more water damage on that trip than I ever care to see in
there's
my entire
the bathroom.
life.
I did put it in. And there's the ladder Norm was on. You can see there's not space for that ladder in that room. So he's like, well, you shouldn't have come in here before because I had my foot over there and my foot over there. I'm like,
as he's playing with wiring.
Yeah. Anyway, and here's a picture of the town dog. The town dog is named Kimball. He was very friendly and there every morning, and people wanted to take him home, but he did belong to somebody.
I thought Steve's family was actually going to take him home. His daughters wanted it so bad.
Yeah, he was just a little thing. Next slide. I don't know how many more of the slides. Oh, this is our finished project. So we put the washer and dryer in one area and then gave them a nice little set of cupboards. The homeowner's like, what am I going to put in there? What do you put in a laundry room for, And we're like, well, I don't know. I'm sure you'll fill it up. So, but they were very happy not to have to walk downstairs to get to their washer and dryer. So that was their main.
Yeah, they had to bring the washer and dryer. Did you bring them up or down the stairs?
We brought them up. It really wasn't. It was maybe like 15 stairs.
Did they have them hooked up on the street down below, or what?
No, they weren't down that far. They weren't down that far. They were just like in the basement.
Okay.
Yeah. So they were very happy to have that little room, and we cleaned their windows and painted, and the homeowner was very, very grateful. All the homeowners were very grateful, and we were just happy to be able to help them do those kind of things. Next slide. Is there some more?
I don't know what else we have on there.
Is that the last one? Oh, that's the last one. Okay. Dave, you have anything?
Well, the other thing, they had encouraged us to make sure we took time to speak to our homeowners and whatever. And I guess one of the highlights is, I don't know what day, maybe Wednesday, Thursday. Lucas and I were working on that rotten hole in the floor, and the lady, Pam, came up to us and goes, I just came from my friend. She has dementia. It's getting bad. She needs help. Would you pray with her tonight when you go back tonight? And instead, Lucas and I stopped right there and prayed with her. And it really seemed to make a huge impression. She was very grateful. And I guess another highlight was getting to know most of these people I had never met before. I mean, I knew who Lucas was. I had met his daughter. obviously I'd seen these guys around church, but the rest of them I'd never met. We had, what, a couple 20-somethings, Austin and Logan. Maddie was 14. And then, of course, then we had Norm kicking the age up to 87.
And Sammy was, what, 2? So we literally had all ages there.
But the kids were great, even though Diane, I think, kind of felt left out. It was great coming back in the evening, totally beat. And those 3 kids were wound up and jumping and running, and it really helped.
Oh, and you got to go on a little trip with 2 of them. Oh, yeah. But you can ask Dave about that later, but Dave had quite the experience one afternoon going on a trip with the 2 20-somethings, which one is like, whew, if you met him, you would know.
He's wild.
He was on my crew.
I mean.
But Dave had a fun trip. So yeah, we're very grateful. It's a very easy trip if we go on one again. You know, there's Norm. I mean, he's very knowledgeable. Norm is very knowledgeable. But if he wasn't, there would have been something for him to do. So the work is not that long. We get an afternoon off. You're really only there 4 days. So the accommodations were nice. The meals were good.
Yeah, it was air conditioned. They try to assign you to where your talents fit, and if you don't have much, they try to get you in with somebody that does. Some groups it's a little challenging if they don't have enough skill there.
Yeah.
But
a lot of youth groups go down, I think. So I assume they do a lot of painting and things like that. But
in the evenings, we also did devotions and some sort of, like Peg did a program on poverty one night. We did the singing. I'm trying to think.
We had Markella and
Markella
gave some like local history.
She's a local restaurant owner. Quite a character.
Yeah. But we're happy to answer any more questions if you have them when you see us, and we do thank you for supporting us.
I'd like to say a little bit
more.
more.
Yeah,
That's
no, that's
all right.
okay.
Yeah, that way Randy doesn't have to preach. He told me to take up as much time as I physically could. But one thing I wanted to talk about was my expectations for this trip, because it was the first mission trip I'd ever been on. And most of you know, I really haven't been in a church for a long period of time, given like over my entire life. And so when they asked me to go on this trip, I was like, yeah, I'll go help build houses for people that can't do it. You know, I was happy to do the work. I enjoy doing that kind of work. And so my expectations going in were I was going to go work on people's houses that couldn't physically do it. And Randy touched on that a little bit. Was some of the hardship for me was meeting some of these homeowners that the first roof that we did, he literally put a tarp underneath of it, and that was it. And I don't know how long it had been leaking, but everything was rotten below there. And so I assumed he physically couldn't do it. I assumed that was why we were there. And about the first day into it, we're getting everything back stable. And he just comes up on the ladder, walks up, brings us some tools, and goes, yeah, I did the first roof wrong, so I figured you guys could, you know, do the rest of it. And that was really hard for me, because just growing up the way I did it was, if you could do it, you did it. And if you could help, you helped. That was what we did. Like, I don't mind helping literally anybody. But if you ask me to help your roof, I assume you're going to come up and help me work on your roof. And that was how it was on the second job for me too. Because we had 2 different roofs that we did, and then we put in those signs. And so that was something that I struggled with really hard, because I was almost asking myself, well, why am I even here if they can physically do it? And after meeting them and talking to them, I knew they financially could. But I think it was what Randy had talked about, where they need the push to know that they can do it, that somebody else cares. That, you know, when I went in and saw the girl and her entire roof was caved in, it wasn't because he didn't want to do it or that he couldn't do it. It was, I needed to do it for her, to show him that we could go down there, we could give up our times away from our family, our jobs, and go down there and work on that. And then another thing that I wanted to touch on was, another thing that was really hard for me was, I had the one young man who is a spitfire, I will say that, when we first got to that roof and I had went in and seen the hole, I walked up on the ladder to see him jumping up and down on the roof where the hole was. And it took everything in me not to cuss him out in that exact moment, because when we're doing physical labor, you know, growing up my entire life, I wish Pat Catalfi was here, because he could, you know, come in on that working at Corey Manufacturing. That was part of the job. You know, it went hand in hand. And so working with him, he wanted to go on the trip, but again, he really didn't know a whole lot about what we were doing. And so we were kind of having to follow him as what he was doing, and I was kind of having to stay behind him to make sure that he understood this was somebody's roof. You know, this was going to be the difference between them and a warm, clean, dry bed. And so it was hard for me to try to fight that the entire time. And then just being in a group with people who were, you know, devout Mennonites their entire life. I found myself in a lot of positions where, you know, you're on a roof with, I have 4 people I had never met before in my entire life. And I would bring up conversations like, oh, what kind of TV do you guys like to watch? And like a couple of them would be like, I don't really watch TV. And I was like, a couple of the guys I was with didn't have a phone, never wanted to have a phone. And so a lot of the conversations we had would be them kind of bringing up negative stuff that I cared about in my life. Not because they were trying to be mean, not because they were trying to be rude, but just because it was how they were raised and how I was raised. You know, I wasn't brought up homeschooled by people who were, you know, super devout Christians, and they were. And so I remember I drove down with 2 kids that had never had a phone in their entire life, only listened to Christian music, and I got in the car and I was like, so what do you guys like to do for fun? And they were like, farm. I was like, do you guys hunt or fish? And they were like, no. And I was like, this is going to be a long 7 hours. And so I remember the one that stuck in my mind was I got a lecture as to why public schools were terrible. And I'm sitting there going, my family all works in the public school system, and I went to public school, and because I was the only guy there like me, I didn't have a leg to stand on because everybody else was homeschooled. If they went to college, they went to Mennonite colleges. I had completely different life experiences than all of these people. And I thought going into this trip the work was going to be the hardest part, but the hardest part for me was trying to bite my tongue and just learn the lessons that I could and bond with these people over helping the community and just trying to move forward with that. So that was something that I struggled with.
My couple, though, couldn't get on the roof.
Yeah, I noticed some of you guys.
James wanted to, but by the time we were there with his heart, and he was legally blind. I mean, he could walk, but he couldn't do his driver's license. He had been a truck driver before health.
Yeah.
Brought him down, and it really bothered him, but he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
You could see it. It kind of bothered him to see us, you know, crawling all over his house and whatnot. But they were so appreciative. The last Friday lunch, they actually made us hot dogs and a salad,
That's awesome.
and we had a nice, it's an extra long lunch just to socialize with them.
Yeah. And so by the end of the trip, because I rode with those 2 boys on the way back, and it was the same deal on the way back, I would kind of bring up some topics of conversation that I thought might interest them, and I'd get kind of shot down right away. And so by the end of it, I'm not going to lie, I was kind of over it. I was like...
Well, they were 2 brothers,
yeah,
too.
Yeah, it would seem like everything that I brought up that was normal in my life was not in anybody else's that I was on the roof. And so mentally, when I got back from the trip, I was pretty drained because in my mind, I was doing work for people who could do it themselves. And I was talking to people who were cutting me down at every point, it seemed like. And so that was just something that I struggled with. I'm really glad that I had a week off to kind of reflect on a lot of things because I don't swear anymore. After a week of living in a church with 3 pastors and nobody else that swore, it took it right out of me. I learned how to not do that anymore. And I actually just had a lot of time to reflect on it and look at the positive aspects of it as opposed to being just mad about it. And so I'm really glad that I went, and I would go again, but I'm glad that I know now what I didn't know then.
Our crew wasn't that conservative. By a long shot.
I'm telling you, when I got to the meeting, when we were going to drive down, in my mind, I pictured, like when we went and did Rocky's roof, I imagined a bunch of guys going down or girls that were, you know, knew kind of what they were doing, and we were just going to go work. And in my mind, work is you get down there, you grab a short breakfast, and you work either till the job's done or till it starts to get dark, and then you go back. And there was so much more prayer and devotion and time together that I thought there was going to be, and there was so many people there that didn't know anything that other than they wanted to help. And they wanted to go down. And so it took me a little bit to get over that too, because I was looking at this going, like Norm, I'm looking at Norm going, how are you going to work on some of this stuff? I'm like, are you going to be all right to go on this trip? And by the end of it, he was more energetic than I was. So it was just neat to see people of all different backgrounds kind of come together and go on a trip like this to help people that didn't know they could help themselves.
There's like an application process for the houses to get chosen. I mean, they didn't tell us what it is, and there isn't any requirement for these homeowners, like a work requirement, or they don't have to contribute, some money. What they ask them is that they can provide bottled water or filtered water for us when we're at the work site. And actually, the people that we worked with, they told Lee that we really can't provide bottled water for them. Now, I mean, if they could or not, I don't know. They were an older couple, and the man was failing in his health, basically. But that's kind of a positive, if you almost ask me, that they could see that this organization that's church-based is just helping people, and there's not like, well, we'll help you, but you've got to come to church 4 times, or this and that. And the need you saw at the beginning, there's so many houses that need need things done, and they want to do it. Some of it's just who they have come down. Like our week, our crew couldn't do like a complicated roof all week, but sometimes they have somebody, so then they have somebody and send that to that job.
And then don't forget the kudzu. It's a vine that grows, I don't know, anywhere from 4 to 8 inches a day or something ridiculous.
It was from, what was the war?
Somebody imported it for erosion control. Big mistake.
It was imported. Well, what I was always told was it was imported during one of the wars as natural barrier and like hiding for soldiers and whatnot in case the war ever came over here. And they brought it over, and it is literally everywhere in the mountain region. It's called kudzu, and it grows as thick as vines as you physically could, and the only way to get rid of it is to burn it.
Vacant houses.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Takes down trees eventually.
Yeah. Trees, power lines, everything. And so I guess just from my perspective on this trip, one thing that I would urge people is if you see somebody that's from a different background that hasn't been in a church system for a long time, one thing that I would have loved is instead of getting cut down right away, I would have loved for somebody who I was on the roof with just be like, well, tell me your perspective. Tell me why you think that, You grew up differently. Let me hear about it. Just to have a conversation with it instead of shooting them down right now. Because it was pushing me away more than it was making me want to go again. And if you'd asked me when I first got back if I was going to go again, I said no. I was like, nope, wouldn't have done it. But again, I've had a week to reflect on it and pray and think about it. And so yeah, that was my takeaway from it.
Well, thank you guys for going and sharing this morning, and also thank you guys for giving, for helping support so people can do that. I think everybody should be able to do stuff like that and go. I'm kind of now sad I didn't get to go, but maybe next time. So what we're going to do now, I know we're smaller numbers this morning. We're going to have a couple songs to close with, and we're going to do communion. But I think we're going to do communion first. And so I'm just going to ask everybody, just kind of slide in. We're just going to kind of just do this right here. Raymond, grab the table. Just something a little different. We don't have a ton of people, just a little intimate and